Hi, my name is Alyssa.
And I'm Tony.
And we are the Sultry Sisters. We're a community-based organization that empowers women to live healthy and creative lives in North County, San Diego, and recently DC.
We curate events, workshops, mixers, and meetups centered around women's arts, wellness, and sisterhood.
Our mission is to empower women to live vibrant and shine bright through creative expression and conscious holistic living.
Our vision is to create a safe space that provides women the arts and wellness resources that are affordable and accessible.
So far, we've partnered with Dancing So Boutique, Village Rock Shop, Carlsbad Village Yoga Co-op, and nonprofit organization Leap to Success. To find out more information about us and to sign up for future events, visit sultrysisters.com.
You can also find us on social media on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at Sultry Sisters.
We hope to see you soon.
Hey, welcome back, Sultry fam. Happy February, happy Black History Month, happy month of love.
Happy Black History Month. Oh, it's good to be back this month. We are heading into some new territory, some new topics. Our theme this month is the art of loving, and we're so excited to get into it. But before we do, we love to start our hangouts with asking y'all where you're tuning in from and what you are sipping on.
Yeah, so you can comment below so we can know who's joining the combo. So I'm Tony, of course. I'm tuning in from the DC area on the East Coast. Today was actually warm, which was nice. I did a walk before the live, and I'm sipping on some tea in my mug that says rather be in bed, because it's a true statement. So I'm sipping on Tulsi, Echinacea, and then some hibiscus.
Oh, I love it. That's a nice little mix. I am tuning in from San Diego, and it's not hot, it's not cold, it's just right. Y'all know San Diego does us well, kind of keeps us in a coasting type of weather. And I am sipping on some green tea in my custom mug that says, "My name AJ." Now, I wish this mug had a handle because it is, as you can see. So I'm gonna let that cool down as we get into the beginnings of our. Oh yeah, I need a cozy. That would be nice. So if you are on our YouTube channel, make sure to subscribe. We'd love your support. When you subscribe, you'll be alerted anytime we go live or upload a new video. We have lots of mindful movement practices. Just get into it. Make sure to subscribe to support the work that we do here on YouTube.
Yes, and so we're already in our second book club of the year. So this is a record already. So it's only February, and we're already on the second book. So we are reading the lovely All About Love by the wonderful Bell Hooks. Yes, and Alyssa is showing my first copy of the book that's now in her library at the house. So I got the first copy when I was in college, actually, because I was in a lot of AFAM classes, like African American Studies classes. So we were learning about Bell Hooks as a Black feminist, as a Black writer, all that great stuff. And so I had gotten the book. I started it, but didn't really finish it. And then it was last year that I got my now copy of All About Love. And then, well, not last year, 2021, I read it fully for the first time. And then I reread it 2022 because it was that good. And now we're reading it as a book club in 2023.
Yes, I love it. This is Tony's original copy. I also have the similar cover as Tony, but I wanted it, just for variety to show. So we have Nia tuning in from Tacoma, DC, and sipping on some slippery elm bark and rose petal tea. Okay, come on with the mix.
That sounds so lovely. So thank you all for joining. And of course, if you're watching the replay, you can still comment below where you're joining from and what you're sipping on. We love all that good stuff. And if this is your first book club, we want to let you know that it's very interactive. So as we go through, we will share, different quotes that stood out to me and Alyssa through the book, but also feel free to comment below what quotes stuck out to y'all, any themes that were coming up. We'll also share and like stop when there's either things that we're defining or
Mhm.
reflection questions that come up, all that good stuff. And then of course it will all flow. So this is the first part of 5. So we'll also blend into March because the book is just that good and we need to make sure we get to
Mhm.
everything. But yeah, All About Love is a classic. So I was excited when Alyssa was interested in doing it for a book club, and we like to theme our programming. So February is always about the month of love. So we do a Valentine's Day event. So we're doing that in California. And then we usually just talk about love and things like that. So we thought it was a great way to blend our love theme, so the art of loving, and then also to feature a Black woman writer since it's Black History Month. So it's kind of all that great stuff in one for our book club this month.
You know, we're always going to come with that holistic ecosystem angle for y'all with our programming. I also wanted to share, if you're interested in our Valentine's Day event, be sure to go to our website or add yourself to our email list because we'll be sending out more information. We'll talk a little bit more about it at the end of today's session, but otherwise let's talk a little bit about, let me ask y'all a question. Let us know in the chat if you've, 1, already read All About Love, or 2, have read any books by Bell Hooks. We want to know. Let us know your familiarity with this amazing author and this amazing book.
Yes. And so All About Love was the first like full book that I read from Bell Hooks. I've read different articles, excerpts, and papers from her. Since she is a Black feminist, like through my major in undergrad, like doing a lot of classes, like FM classes, and
Mhm.
then in my grad program, taking Black women and girls health class with Dr. Barlow. We read a lot of Hooks' work. But a lot of it was more so her philosophy, her thoughts, and her approach to feminism and womanism and all that stuff. So this book to me is very special because it was the first time I like personally connected to bell hooks, and we'll get into that as we share some of our quotes that we really resonated with in the first 3 sections. But yeah, I was just like I feel like connected to her because our upbringing and my like from
Mhm.
my experience, my upbringing was very similar to hers, and I was just like, I didn't know this about her, so that was nice to read this, and especially at that part of my journey I was in 2021 was kind of cultivating more love in my life in general, just really expansively. So it really was pivotal in my healing journey. Um, and then I like to read it with folks too. So I do like personal book clubs. So the people that
Mhm.
I read it with, I just get really into it. So that's I've read the book multiple times. I recommend it all the time. People are like, "What should I read?" I'm like, "All About Love." And now for me, it's kind of like a personal recommendation slash requirement for people who are like romantically interested in me. I'm like, have you read All About Love? Because if you haven't, then like come on now. So that's just kind of one
Okay,
thing that's
prerequisite.
yeah, it's kind of like, before you start a course, like they have the prereq readings and like this is before you start the Tony course, read this.
Oh, I love that. So for me, my first time reading All About Love was this past fall. Tony had recommended this book to me many times, y'all. Anytime I'll be like talking about, like self-love, love. She's like, "You have you read the book? Have you read the book? Have you read the book?" And I'm like, I'm going to, I'm going to, I'm going to. And so this fall I took the time to read it, and y'all, it it was I would read it during my lunch break on the beach. And so it was just a beautiful like mixture of tapping back into my self-care routine, my personal soul care routine. This was like me coming back to myself in the fall, falling back in love with myself. So I'm excited this round to read it in community with our Soul Tree fam. So definitely feel like this is a book to come back to. And as we continue to talk about the intro and the first 2 chapters, it hits different every time.
Yeah, and so we did want to check in with everyone on what is your current relationship to love. So it's not just so this month when we talk about the art of loving, we're not just talking about romantic love. We know like Valentine's Day and stuff like that. It's usually centered around that. But as sultry, we are expansive. So that could be platonic love, that could be familial love, that could be romantic. It could be all the things, self-love included. So yeah, so what is your relationship to love?
Mm, great question. Oh, Jasmine. Yes, Tony course. Love that. Yes, the Tony course. The Tony course.
Yay, Jasmine. I'm so glad you got to join. Jasmine's one of my soul sisters, y'all. So it's very special that she's here. And yes, Jasmine, I remember going to your apartment in New York and seeing your All About Love on your shelf. And just, I just feel like it's such a special book to me. So when I know people who have read it, it just makes me feel even more like, I'm like, yes, we share the same love for this book.
Yeah. I think my current relationship to love um is my current relationship, I guess my current status is expanding, because ever since reading this book in the fall, my definition, my relationship has been expanding. I've been having to coming off of our book club with Rest of Resistance, deprogram my attachments to what love, means to me. So for me, I would say my word is expanding, my expansive. My relationship is expanding in what love can look like in my life. So it's more so finding different ways to practice the art of loving outside of romantic relationships. So I'm kind of that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I'll say for me, kind of similar in the expansiveness of love, where I'm really like leaning into and cultivating love in like all the nooks and crannies of my life. So whether that's romantic, whether that's friendship, whether that's like through family, whether that's like self-love through rest, which we talked about rest last month. So if you were not part of our book club, you can go on our YouTube and catch some of the replays there. But yeah, so like also loving myself through rest. But yeah, I would say my current relationship to love is healthy. I feel like in years prior, I had like an unhealthy relationship to love, which we'll get into as we go through all the chapters in the book. But definitely just thinking, just feeling close. Previously, I was closed off to love due to like things that I've experienced in the past, like relationships that didn't work out, upbringing that wasn't the best, things like that. But it was through therapy, reading this book in 2021 that really kind of was a catalyst to shift um, and to bring in a new way
Mm,
of
mm,
relating to love. And
mm,
I think that's why like the theme, the art of loving is just, I think it
mhm.
is like there's so many creative ways to love other folks, to love yourself, to be in community with love, all these things. So yeah, I feel like currently I'm in a healthier space. Of course it's a journey, but I can definitely say in the past, Tony was not doing this.
I feel you. It's a journey. Nia
Yeah.
shares, my relationship with love currently feels like learning, unlearning, healing, and remembering. Yes,
Hmm.
I feel that.
Yes. Yeah, and it's an iterative process, right? So as we learn, we're unlearning. As we heal, there are things that bring up are brought up that we remember. There's things that that we're discovering, that we're
Mhm.
uncovering, imagining. So yeah, I love that. And Jasmine in the chat says that she loves your comment, Nia. Um, and yeah, it's just I think this book, like All About Love, to me, really helps break down what this big abstract idea or feeling of what love is to these kind of tangible, bite sized like truths or bell hooks truths and opinions, and then I was able to reflect on that. So yeah, I felt like for me it was a very inviting book, even though love can be daunting when you what she talks about in the intro, which we'll get into.
Mhm.
And then we also wanted to ask you all, what has your love practice looked like this week? So again, these questions we'll kind of revisit each week in the book club to kind of check in. before we get into all the quotes?
Mm. To be perfectly candid, this year, this week, this year, this month, this day, this week has been really, really hard. So my love practice this week, I would say unclear.
Mm.
It's looked unclear. I feel like I felt like very unclear in my heart, my spirit. But what brought me back to shore, y'all, was friends showing me love, reminding me, speaking of Nia, reminding me what love feels like. And so I had a friend, like I was having a tough day on Tuesday, and they just texted me like, do you mind if I come by your studio? We go get lunch and walk the beach. I'm like, yes, because I love to go to the beach and I love to
Mhm.
eat at the beach. But for that day, like it's like sometimes you forget the things that you love to do, but it's
Mhm.
sometimes an outside person, a friend that will remind you that you love to do that thing by doing it with you. So for me, my love practice was unclear at the beginning of the week, but baby, Tuesday, a friend came in and reminded me, and I was like, okay, like I got this. So that's what my love practice. It looked like me receiving it.
Nice. I
I
love
will.
that.
Mhm.
Right? And like the loving and supportive folks in our communities and our circles, right, are mirrors for those things. And that's what I enjoy about connections and relationships is that they're mirrors to all of this.
Mhm.
And so for me, my love practice this week, I would say has been being consistent in my walks. Cause like a couple weeks ago, I wasn't consistent because I was just like going through a lot of things, still currently going through a lot of things, but been like, okay, let me go outside. Like today was warm. So I like started bleeding today on my menstrual cycle. So I was not feeling the most energy, but the weather was nice. The sun was still out when I left the house. And I was like, okay, Tony, you can walk. And so that's something that I do love doing to love on myself. So that's something this week specifically I have actually felt wanting to pour into myself in that way.
Mhm.
Um, and also spending like intentional time with my loved ones has been really nice and warming for me to cultivate that space with folks. Because yeah, there is has been a lot of stuff going on, so it has been nice to make that space for that in person time with folks.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, having like a love ecosystem. We'll talk later about like a love ethic, but
Hmm.
sometimes it's hard for us to generate those things on our own. So when we have those mirrors, those reminders, that's how we can sustain our love practice.
Hmm.
And so Nia shares, same here, AJ. This week has been rough. Whew, rough week. But similar to you, opening myself to receiving love from friends has been uncomfortable. Yes,
Hmm.
needed reminder of the love and support I have around me. Say it again. It does feel uncomfortable sometimes to receive it. And as we get into the chapter, we kind of learn why too. Yeah, it's uncomfortable for me when I need something and I get it because I have this feeling that I should be able to generate it myself. So it's just this weird double-edged sword when someone gives me something that I need, instead of being like, oh, thank you. I was like, but I should have done that myself. It's
Hmm.
such a weird feeling. So that's what I'm kind of unlearning and deprogramming. And so I've
Hmm.
been saying this week when people do nice things, like, I'm receiving this and I'm releasing myself
Hmm.
having to give you something back right now. I will
Hmm.
give you back something, energetically, but like I'm just gonna receive this.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's good. And then Jasmine shares, one of my love practices lately has been planning solo dates. I've been
Hmm.
desperately wanting to go on a date, and I finally said to myself, you can take yourself on a date. I love that for you, Jasmine. Yeah, that's something that when I am actively going on a bunch of different dates and stuff, and I do have that feeling because, yes, it happens to many of us. I do intentionally be like, okay, Tony, you're going to take yourself on a date, whatever you wanted to do. Let's say I want to go to a museum, I wanted to go to a restaurant. I take myself to that thing instead of waiting around. And even I do that if I'm waiting around for like a friend to do something. I'm like, I don't need to wait, just do it. So that also to me can be uncomfortable too, But once I do it, I do feel better. So I do feel you in that, Jasmine.
Yeah, I love that, Jasmine. I actually bought myself tickets to see a show tonight, like my own ticket. But then a friend reached out to me to see if I was interested in going. I was like, I already bought myself a ticket. So we decided that we're going to meet at their place and walk together, but we're still going to sit separately for the show. But so I totally understand, Jasmine, of taking yourself on dates.
Yeah. And also New Year's shares. Yeah, I love that for you, Jasmine. Pouring that love back into yourself is so
Mm,
important, right? Yes. So that's y'all are right already on point for what we'll
we
be
are.
talking throughout the whole month of the art of loving theme that we have. And then also, of course, the book all about love. So now that we're primed and warmed up, let's get into the book. So we'll start with the intro, then we'll get into chapter 1 and then chapter 2. So if you have read it or you have the book with you, you can read along. And if you don't, that's totally fine as well. Because we will put the quotes up and then folks will comment. So it's also just a discussion as well.
All right. So the first quote we wanted to share from the intro was, "It was love's absence that let me know how much love mattered."
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
And I really felt that when Bell Hooks was talking about that because she was talking about how, throughout her different relationships and life experiences, she had always wanted love or kind of thought things she was in was love. And then realizing that it was when it wasn't there, when it wasn't present, was when she realized the importance to her. And I resonate with that a lot too, because I feel like it's in times when, I'm really down, or like even like in 2020 when like the world was just flipped upside down on the side, then back and forth, that I was just like, yeah, I wanted more love in my life, right? And not just romantic, but like community love and all of that stuff.
Yeah, and this quote also makes me think of the saying, "Absence makes the heart grow fonder." I mean, I know they talk about between interpersonal, but I also understand that feeling of like knowing what you have, knowing what you have based off when you don't have it. So definitely. And the next one we wanted to share is, "Call for a return to love. Redeem and restored love returns us to the promise of everlasting life. When we love, we can let our heart speak."
Hmm.
That last line, "when we love, we can let our heart speak."
Yeah, and I found that really profound because it's which we'll get into in a second when we talk about the intro. But yeah, I feel like a lot of times people are like, oh, love, like it's either like super picturesque, like a fairy tale love, and you find your perfect person and it's amazing and there's nothing ever wrong. You just live life happily ever after. Or it's like, why do I need love? Like, I'm gonna just make money, like, I'm gonna just be by myself, it's fine. But that last part of like when we love, we get to let our hearts speak. And I feel like that also ties into rest is resistance, right? Like, what is your spirit saying? What is your heart saying? Like that
Mhm.
tapping into that inner being of yourself. And I have felt that through my journey, my healing journey of like when I have been in this healthier space and healthier relationship to love, I feel like my heart is speaking more and I am able to lean into that and know that it's my heart speaking versus before it just like
Fear.
being like, yeah, fear based or like meshed in with something else that wasn't love.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. Did y'all have anything from the intro? Any quotes, any messages, any insights that struck y'all? Go ahead and share in the comments.
And then with this quote, before we move on to the next one, it starts off with a call to return to love. And I appreciate
Mhm.
her wording of that too, because it's like a return, right? It's not something that we have never had before, right? Even though there's love's absence, it's not saying that we've never had it. It's a return, right? Whether that's returning to self love, whether that's returning to
Mhm.
romantic or platonic or familial, right? Like we're going back to, right? Just like reclaiming that love in our lives. I think that's very empowering too when we talk about language, is that it's not
Mm.
that we don't have any love in our life and we need to go find it, and it's some external thing that's just going to drop from the sky and our life is just going to boss up 10,000 times. It's like, no, like this is internal, and this is that's why I thought All About Love was a great book for us to transition into after Rest is
Mhm.
Resistance, because it does kind of build on those same foundations of like internal self, and really connecting to your mind, your body, your heart, and your spirit.
Mhm. Coming from a place of abundance that we have this
Mhm.
knowledge, and it's a matter of us being intentional to connect back to it. Exactly. I definitely
Mhm.
feel the connection of both books and the journey we're going. I'm curious where we're gonna go from this whole year. Like we're just going on this ride, y'all. And we're very
Yeah.
organic, so we kind of just go as we flow.
Mhm. Yes, we go as we flow. I like that. So yeah, so that was kind of the preface that we just touched on with those two quotes. And so now we'll get into the intro. So the intro is Grace, touched by love. And so I really appreciated the intro for kind of just setting the tone, setting the stage as for why Bell Hooks wrote this book,
Mhm.
what made her curious about studying love. And she does talk about that, like she's really studying it. And yeah, I felt like the intro really was the foundation, which makes sense. That's why it's an intro book, but I do feel like it set the tone for the rest of the chapters.
And I love this first quote. We yearn for love that we seek it, even when we lack hope that it really can be found.
Hmm.
Even when we
Right?
lack hope that it really can be found.
Right. So again, it's that abundance mindset. It's that, return to. So even though it's something we're yearning for and we want, it's something that we can go back to, right, when we're ready, when we're at that place that our heart is open to receive it. Right, you mentioned receiving. um
Mhm. I think too that saying like, I don't know what it looks like, but I know when I feel it, I know it's there. Like when I think of the yearning, when I think of yearning for love, it's like, well, how are you gonna find it? I was like, well, I don't know what it looks like, tastes like, but I know when it happens, then it's gonna be affirmed.
mhm,
Like that's when I think of yearning, I feel like I think of the senses. Like you're like, where is it? But it's like
mhm.
it's only when it's in front of you that you're like, yep, that's it. That's the smell. That's the touch. That's the taste. That's everything. So that's what this
Yeah.
quote brings up for me.
Yeah, and I feel like it also like normalizes yearning for love, because I feel like there's also something in society, which we'll get into in the next couple quotes, but like of that, like we shouldn't want love, that like then we seem desperate or like lonely, or just something that's like a negative feeling associated with it that we're yearning for. And it's just like, well, if
Yeah.
love helps us, in our process of healing, of returning to ourselves and our
Mhm.
spiritual journey, then why is this so bad to want this thing, right? So I also felt like that's kind of what that quote was touching on, is that like we seek it, we yearn from it, we yearn for it, and that it can be found, right? So like just because we're seeking it and maybe haven't had it yet doesn't mean that it's not out there.
Yes, and I also want to go back a little bit too, like having it yet, looking for it. It's like it's also this saying also is tapping into the fact that maybe we have like touched by love. We've all been touched by love.
Mhm.
It's the essence of remembering and being face to face with it again, like that finding that time to unite with it. So
Mhm.
I think Bell Hooks is really clever with the title and then the different quotes we're highlighting.
Yeah. And then also just, yeah, the title of the chapter, Grace, right? I think that also sets the tone for this chapter and for the book. It's like, let's give ourselves grace as we're learning, unlearning,
Mhm.
remembering, returning, all of those things that, if we can have that, rooted in grace, can help us on
Mhm.
this journey. And so going into, yeah, the next quote says, I am afraid that we may be raising a generation of young people who will grow up afraid to love, afraid to give themselves completely to another person, right? So it's like through movies, through songs, through the books we read and stuff, I feel like, yeah, society is at a space where we do talk about love a lot, and this is what Bell Hooks talks about. We talk about it, right, as this like
Mhm.
phenomenon, this like abstract concept that just happens to us. But yeah, it's like then because we don't necessarily feel like we've known it before, then we're afraid to give ourselves right to receive. We feel uncomfortable when we're in these
Mhm.
spaces of getting love.
And then another quote, I am afraid that we will grow up looking for intimacy without risk, for pleasure without significant emotional investment. Okay, let's pause here.
Hmm.
This feels real to me, y'all. Let me break it down. I'm afraid that we will grow up looking for intimacy without risk. Dating apps. Dating apps.
Wait, what?
Sorry.
Can you expand on that?
Yeah, I want to expand on that. Like I'm saying, without risk. Like I've heard a lot, like because it's different than putting yourself out there in person. I'm afraid we'll grow into looking for intimacy without risk or not truly wanting to meet I don't know. That's just for me personally. I'm responding to this quote. And then for pleasure without significant emotional investment. So this whole technological division, like I'm not I use dating apps, I use social media, but I'm saying like I'm afraid we'll grow up intimacy without risk, like not really being face to face and having that type of risk of putting yourself out there. I feel like it's not the same. The game has changed. So that's what I think about. I think about when I see this quote, the current state we're in of how we meet, how we interact, how on a dating app, if you don't get along, you can literally just unmatched and they never have your attachment. Like you'll never be able to see them at the coffee shop anymore. So it's like it's just a different type of way to connect and also like an easier way to disconnect. So that's when I see this quote, I think about that. Like it's low risk. Like, oh yeah, it doesn't matter because if it doesn't work out, I'm just gonna delete this person. I'll ghost them and I'll never see them again. So that I feel like that has entered the space of connection.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah, that's not where my head went. But yeah, I could see how that could be low risk for folks. I feel
Mm.
like the dating app sort of is risk because even if someone doesn't connect with you, they can see that you're on there and they can be like, oh,
Oh,
Tony's out here trying to date. Like, I ain't
oh,
gonna
I
match with her,
see.
but she out here looking for love. Look at her trying to look for love. Like, so I think it
Mm.
could also be like that, but I don't. But in this quote for me, I thought more of nowadays people are looking for intimacy without risk, like more just like casual relationships and very surface level things where they're not getting uncomfortable, they're not digging deep, they're not necessarily talking
Mm.
about their spiritual like connections, they're not necessarily connecting on deeper levels. So that's like the less risk where it's like you're just
Mm.
talking about like current events, whatever your interests are, but not really like on a soul level being like, okay,
It's
do
the
I connect with
doing.
you?
I see.
Yeah.
It's
And
the
then
doing.
also, like with pleasure without significant emotional investment, that can be enabled by the apps, right? If people just want to go on the apps and find casual connections and just have sex and pleasurable things, which I'm sex positive, so that's great for folks. But I do feel like, yeah, that lacks intimacy if you're just connecting with folks for this pleasure that's fleeting, right? So pleasure is wonderful and expansive, but I think if it doesn't have that intimacy, then yeah, there's not that significant investment
Mhm.
emotionally, and then therefore you're left without love and yearning and lacking still. So yeah, I think it all goes together. I think it's like a mentality and
Mm.
headspace too, right? If you go into a certain situation thinking like this is low risk, I'm just gonna like try it out, then you're probably going to get low risk just trying it out connections. But if you go into any situation being like, I really want a deep connected space where someone sees my soul and lets my heart speak, then I think you're more so going to get those types of connections, right? So I think it kind of is about intention, which we'll talk about in a little bit.
His next quote, ultimately, cynicism is the great mask of disappointed and a betrayed heart. And I
Hmm.
was like, okay, so you know how people say, like, I think about that and I'm like, okay, whenever someone is saying poo-poo on something, sometimes it can be because they've been disappointed before,
Hmm.
betrayed. So for me, this quote made me think about just like that grace, keeping an open mind, like we're about to get into this book. And if you feel like love hasn't worked for you, just know that it might be coming from a place of that you've been disappointed and maybe coming from a place of feeling betrayed before. So for me, I feel like this quote was a bell hooks trying to say, like, give yourself grace, like, hear me out, keep an open mind, keep reading. This is you, keep reading.
Yeah. And I wanted to highlight a comment from Nia. So Nia shares that quote also speaks to the resilience of love for me, the way it drives you through those periods of hopelessness, because it's such a divine and full feeling and desire that continues to push you forward, right? Yeah, it's because if you have experienced it, right, the feeling of love, the experience of love, yeah, you can, tap back into that in moments of hopelessness or when times of strife and adversity. And yeah, it's not a walk in the park, but yeah, it's a part of the journey, I think, too. So yeah, thank you for sharing that, Nia. But yeah, I definitely think that cynicism is especially, I think also with social media when all these reels and TikToks about like, oh, like, I don't know, they just talk about dating a lot in a negative way. Again, like I said, it's really extreme. It's either like I found my perfect person and we're perfect and here's now our lifestyle vlogs together, or it's like, oh, these dating apps suck, or it's like, what else do people talk about? Just like kind of like reenacting their dates and
No,
just
I
really having
agree.
lack of hope in dating.
Yeah,
And
no,
it's like, oh, I just need to be set up. I need a sugar daddy, or I need like someone to arrange me. And these are all great options as well. But it's just like, oh yeah, there is that twinge of like hopelessness, it seems like, or
yeah, I
or
would say
what's the word? Like skepticism. That's the word I was looking
yes. I would say my cynicism, whenever in regards like love, especially romantic relationships, comes from those two things, disappointment and betrayal. So for me, I was like, ooh, ah,
for. But yeah, the quote said it's a great mask, right? So cynicism doesn't mean someone's immune, right? It's a mask. So it's really maybe they haven't healed through something, or they haven't, opened their heart
mhm,
in that way. So yeah, there is disappointment and betrayal there, but it's a mask, right? So it's not necessarily
yep,
saying it's not there. It's like
yeah,
what's in the
it's,
mask.
it's just a mess.
hmm
And
And
that's yeah, go ahead.
no, yeah, the next quote is all great movements for social justice in our society have strongly emphasized a love ethic, love as a transformative force. So I think this really does tie into like 2020, the Black Lives Matter movement, and then everything since, right? Just like I feel like social justice things have been more so on people's front of their minds.
Mhm,
And I just love that Bell Hooks really talks about, love being the ethic and the way through. And that reminds me of, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., like a lot of his writings too talk about love. And yeah, a lot of people, Bell Hooks writes about this as well. Like a lot of folks who are more so in the spiritual space, um, and who are religious talk about love as this thing that, is granted to us and all this stuff and stuff we experience spiritually, but somehow there's a disconnect between knowing love through your spiritual and religious practices and like actually practicing love in your day-to-day life. So I thought that was interesting too when we talk about social justice movements,
mhm,
right? Like we want love in our personal lives, but we, in my experience, I haven't really heard in the current modern social justice movements, people really grounding themselves in love. I've been now the accounts that I follow personally, yes, I see it, but the big stuff you see on the news, I don't necessarily see them being like all we need is love, right? Like back in the
mhm,
day, like I don't
yeah,
see that as much so as like the posters that people are putting up for these movements. But I think that's really the part that's going to sustain us and create that radical change is when many more of us are practicing a love ethic.
and I feel like having a love ethic, it means you have empathy. And I feel
hmm
like when there's a lack of empathy, there's a lack of love. And that's the ethic that we're talking about. When you feel for
hmm
someone, that's the art of loving, is having empathy for someone and wanting justice, wanting equality, equity, all those things that we talk about when we talk about everyone's basic rights. That's practicing a love ethic. When you want everyone to have equal rights,
hmm
um, and when people are arguing about that, I'm like, well, then where's the love? Where's the love? Where's the empathy for these people who want justice, who want certain things to be basic rights? And that's where, movements and politics, that's when that love ethic is like, is it here?
Yeah. Yeah, I also feel like now that we're in the age of cancel culture, right? Like, I think cancel culture is like very opposite to a love ethic. I think, maybe the remediation between cancel culture and love ethic would be like what they term transformative justice, where it's
Right.
like you don't necessarily need to cancel everyone, but there's a way to transform the harm into a healing space for folks.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think that's what's kind of missing. I think transformative justice does have love as an ethic, but cancel culture and just other types of parts of our culture now does lack that, I feel. But that's
Or
my unpopular opinion.
yeah, and also like blaming the other. That's not a love
Mhm.
ethic, putting it on them. And that kind of brings me to this next quote, which we're sharing just to start a conversation, is men theorize about love, but women are more over love's practitioners. How do y'all feel about this?
Mhm.
Share in the comments. This is a quote we wanted to share just to spark some conversation, because Bell Hooks does spend some time talking about the difference between how men receive love and how women receive love, and therefore how we respond to what love
Mhm.
is, how we define it, and how we practice it.
Yeah, I do feel like I don't know, even when we talk about pop culture, we think about like hip hop music, movies, like Instagram, blogs. I do feel like men and also there's a critique of All About Love, which was written many years ago, but there's a critique that Bell Hooks specifically talks about heterosexual dynamics and like straight relationships in which he talks about romantic love. But anyways, when we talk about men, I do feel like straight men do think about love as an abstract thing more so. And then Bell Hooks does talk about in the book like how men more so have received love.
Mhm.
Um, and so they talk about it in this way that I guess is more positive because they are the receiving ends of it. And then she talks about like women being more the ones who practice love, but don't talk about it in a
Mhm.
way that's as like uplifting because
Mhm.
they feel the absence of love. So I feel like when she mentions that, I feel like, oh, I get what she's saying, and I feel like I feel like that is true in some regard, right? Maybe not the full truth, but I do feel like there's some truth to it. Um, yeah, but I guess I would lean into especially like women being love practitioners because I think that not exclusively only for women, but like, I don't know, I think just even in the circles I'm in, there's more women who are healing, who are, trying to transform like, things from their past into, a healed version. Well, not healed as in like it's a final destination, but like
Mhm.
a healing version of themselves
Mhm.
and are able to give love from a space of a healthy way and not necessarily like reproducing toxic examples of love.
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel like it's partially that where it's not necessarily like men aren't capable, but it's just like a lot of the men that I'm around are not necessarily actively having these conversations about a book club, talk about love and all this stuff. Like there's some, of course, right? But I don't think it's as much like men in droves talking about this and practicing love in this way.
Mhm. Yeah, I can see that. One thing that's coming to my mind as you were talking, and I'm looking at this quote, like if I had to if I were to remix this into like not a binary of men versus women, I would remix this quote, be like, some people will talk about it and some people will be about it.
Mhm.
Yeah, like, and I think for me, it makes me think of, I can think about, if I think about the dynamic of like my family dynamic, like mom versus dad in my personal experience, I can see like how my mom was more of a
Mhm.
love practitioner and my father Our father will be like the one to be texting like, love y'all, like, have a great day, love y'all. But my mom's like, making sure like I have certain things, and like it's very much like an action versus like a word. So if I were to like come up from a place of experience, the difference with my parents, that's how I would relate to this quote.
Or just like now when you see all the like straight men with these podcasts talking about relationships and love, and it's like then sometimes you ask them like, "Are you dating? Do you have a relationship?" And they're like, "Nah, like I just out here on these apps, blah blah." And it's just like, so you have this whole podcast, but you don't. So I think that's also kind of in line with this quote, and just like setting it in current day, right? Because this was written many years ago. Which goes into the next quote, which is male fantasy is seen as something that can create reality. So when they talk about, their love experiences and stuff, is more so seen as truth, whereas female fantasy is regarded as pure escape, right? So when women talk about our experiences, it's much more regarded to as like, oh, this is just like lovely, story that she just shared about this, fictional thing. And we're like, what? But this is our experience. But with men's things she was talking about, like it's more so seen as reality. And she talked specifically about books written on love as a concept are more so like men who write the books are more so seen as authorities, especially at the time she wrote the book. They're more so seen as authorities, like people getting all these books written by men, but not necessarily buying and supporting women writers and women leaders in the space of love. And I do feel like that is truthful. I mean, nowadays it's a little bit different, especially now with social media. There's a little bit more of a widened playing field of like who is an expert. But I do feel like when I was growing up, I feel like a lot of times there was like men
Act
author
like a
books.
lady, think like a man, like Steve Harvey writing a book on love. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah, and
like,
like just seen as an authority, and people just buying the book and reading. You know what I mean? So yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that. And like Bell Hooks as a Black woman writer was just like, yo, like, why is this the only things we can look up? Yeah.
you asked me that question. Let me share Nia's comment. Interestingly enough, it was the opposite in my house growing up. My father was the major practitioner of love. Yes.
Yeah.
I definitely feel like it can happen either way. I think that's what I love about what's going to happen in this book club. We're able to like share our personal experiences too and add that nuance.
Yeah. So the next quote I want to share is it's far easier to talk about loss than it is to talk about love. It is easier to articulate the pain of love's absence than to describe its presence and meaning in our lives. I think that really wraps up everything we've been talking about, right? It's like when it's not there, it's easy to be like, oh, love, like, I'm not sure if it's for me. I don't know if it's out there, versus really opening up your heart space to be like, yo, like this is actually a really great space. Like this is amazing. And so I feel like I have felt that shift in myself since 2020 and beyond of like really opening up my heart to receive love. And it is hard at times because you have to be vulnerable, right? That's the thing that's scary for many folks. And to be real, like it's real feelings, it's your real life, your real emotions. So yeah, it's easier to be like, oh, this person like did me wrong. So like, I'm not sure if love is
How many
there.
songs we have about heartbreak?
Yeah.
So many songs about heartbreak, y'all.
Exactly. And so
The
it's like,
ratio between
yeah, so it does take effort to really lean into being like, no, actually, I want this for myself. So yeah, so if you're someone who feels like, you want to talk about love and you don't have the space, well, welcome to Soul Tree. Come to our book club every Wednesday, and this is a space for that.
This is another quote that is really attached to Grace Touched by Love is everyone assumes that we will know how to love instinctively. I really appreciated her like setting that ground. It's like, it's not something you just kind of, how to do. It's something, it's a behavior that is learned. And the next quote is family is the primary school of love. Like that's when we first learn it. That's where we first receive it. And so I really appreciated her setting that in the intro of like, if you don't know how to love, don't worry. It's not supposed to be something you should know how to do, like breathing. It's not something that's, downloaded through birth. But it is something that you gain a definition from your primary relationships, which is family.
Yeah, and then Bell Hooks wraps up the intro by sharing that All About Love provides radical new ways to think about the art of loving, right? So that's why the theme of February is the art of loving. So we can dive deeper into these radical ways to open up ourselves, to connect back to self and all of that. So yeah, that's the intro, right? There was a lot in Grace Touched by Love. We touched on
Mhm.
most of it, but if you haven't already, go back to the intro and soak that in, revisit it. But we do want to get into the next chapter because I feel like this really is like the foundation, the like
Mhm.
core, the roots of All About Love.
Yes.
So chapter 1 is clarity, give love words. So I feel like this chapter for me really like again sets the tone. And so the first quote we wanted to share is our confusion about what we mean when we use the word love is the source of our difficulty in loving. Right? So when we're like, "Oh, I love you," and you're kind of like, "What do you mean by that?" Like, "Huh? What is that?" Or then you'll be like, "Yeah, I love you too," and then there's two different definitions, right?
Yes.
So it's like,
You ever
it's
have people say like, "Hey, bye, love you." You're like, "Bye, oh, okay."
like, you're like, "I just
I
met
have a
you
lot of people who say,
yesterday."
"Bye, love you" to me. Like you're there, like turn away, like, "Bye, I love you." I'm like, don't you want to say it like I love you? I don't know. I just feel like it's very casual. Anyways, as a side. That's the confusion about when we mean the word love. Like that's an example. And so we want to ask y'all a question. Few grounding questions for this chapter is when and where did you first learn about love? When and where? I know Bell Hook shares her thoughts, but we wanted to open up to y'all to share when you experienced it, where you were.
Yeah, I can't really remember any specific personal experience like when I was young, but I would think just like seeing like movies and TV growing up and just kind of
Mhm.
seeing that like picturesque like
Mhm.
example of what love is. Yeah, because for me it wasn't necessarily in the household. It was more so like from movies, videos, magazines, stuff like that.
Okay, wait. Barney, I love you. You love me. We're a happy family. What a great big hug and a kiss from me to you. Won't you say you love me too? Yes, Kyle, Barney. In the comments, let us know if Mr. B Town taught you how to love. That's why I know
That's
that
so
song.
funny. I was actually a Barney kid, so that's so funny that I totally forgot about Barney. But yeah, I was a Barney kid, so yeah, I did listen to that on my VHS tapes. That is so hilarious, Kyle. So that's
And
hilarious.
that's probably the first time I ever like said the word is from Barney.
I was like bars.
Bars.
The cousin love that she starts the discussion with clarifying the terms, very philosophical. Right, right. And then
Mhm.
Kyle loves philosophy, so Kyle was a fan.
Mhm.
But yeah, so put in the comment besides Barney, what y'all learn about love? And then also, how do you define love, right? So what does love mean to you?
Yeah. I mean, before reading this book, I did not have a clear definition. So I'm excited that we'll be able to talk about it in a second. But let us know, how do you
Yeah,
define?
I feel like it's hard for me to define it now because now I've read the
Yeah, but
book
I
multiple
know. I'm
times.
like,
I feel like it's like in my core being. But essentially, I think before reading All About Love, I think I define love as like deep care and respect for someone that I really cared about
mm,
and like a mutuality to it. And that it was like a deeper level than like the other types of relationships I may have had. So I feel like when I had like loved someone, it was like, ooh, that's like a next level. So yeah, I didn't have the words to
yeah.
it, but I had felt like when I did love
Mhm.
someone, it was like
Mhm.
graduated up.
I think before reading this book and before my personal like healing journey with love, I define love through hardship. Like when I'm going through a tough time, someone who's there for me. When I feel alone, someone, like, I defined it through through a net, like a negative that brought me to a positive. Like I related to love as like, I defined it when someone's there for me, when I don't have this, and then someone comes and brings me this. So I don't know. I just felt like my definition of love wasn't from a place of abundance at first. It was from like a place of scarcity. Like only one person knows me, and that's how they love me, because I only tell them my secrets and only they know. And I feel totally different now. But when I reflect, it came from like that teen love, like only you. Ashanti, only, that song.
Yeah.
Bam.
Yeah, and I feel like now that I'm older and have been to therapy, I would say that specific experience is like trauma bonding.
Yeah,
not
exactly.
love. So if you're a younger person who's going through something like that, that is not love. But I thought of the song like "Love Is a Battlefield" by Pat
Yeah.
Benatar, right? And it's
We
just
are
like,
young.
yeah, and it's just like heartache to heartache.
But that's what we learned. We learned that love is a battlefield. Only you, only one person.
Like, excuse me, no. So yeah, it's just like, yeah, right, the pop culture with like music, with movies, TV, magazines, all that stuff growing up, the books we read was like all this stuff about love that I felt like did not talk about it, one, in a healthy way, or two, really connect back to, right, like letting your heart speak. So yeah, I think that's very important. And then Kyle shares, big question. But for me, I've always thought of love in two senses, the action part and the feeling part. Action wise, I look at it as pouring your energy into someone through care and investment. Okay, I like that. Then we're going to have a part two coming up. I think he's still writing. But yeah, I do. I feel that too. I feel like I have felt it as like a feeling thing and then like a doing thing. So I do feel that as well.
And
So
so
we'll
thank
let
y'all for
Kyle.
sharing your definition. Oh, and then the second half?
Not yet, but I'm just saying we'll let him continue writing.
Okay, let's share Bell Hook's definition, or the definition she shares in the book. Love is the will to extend oneself for the purpose of nurturing one's own and another's spiritual growth. This is by Enrich Fromm. And I was like, wow, I never even thought of it like that.
Yeah. So yeah, now this is what I know to be
Yes.
love.
Yes.
Because
Now we're on the same page.
read this book so much, it's just like a personal Bible of sorts for me. But yeah, when she mentioned the will to extend oneself for the purpose of nurturing one's own or another spiritual growth. I also appreciated that it was like one's own, right? Like you start with yourself, right? In the airplane, they say put your mask on first, then help other people. It's like you got to pour into yourself to pour into others. And I feel like I appreciate that with this love definition, is that it's like, okay, you nurture your own or someone else's. And it's that spirituality part that I thought was important too, which I felt like movies and all that stuff did not talk about spiritual growth or spiritual
Nurturing
connection.
someone's spiritual growth. No, it was like
when
giving
love don't cost
flowers or doing something. It was very transactional. I feel like society painted a picture of a transactional love. And the next quote is, love is an act of will, namely both intentional and action. So Kyle, what you're sharing is you and Bell Hooks, y'all was just kicking it together, right?
Yeah. Oh, here's the second part for Kyle's thing. The feeling part of it for me is that strong pull / attraction, but really I feel like that's a more selfish part. You feel that towards your idea of a person, but the feeling is a good, enlivening one. That is a good point, sir. I feel like all of us could write some theses on on love and what that means for us. And I do see Jasmine's comment in the chat, like, do you post the questions later? So the YouTube video itself is up, the replay is up after, so you'll be able to see the questions later. But that is a good point.
Yeah,
maybe we'll add them to the description box. the description box of each video, so you'll see the questions asked for each one, and then we can also add it to our book club page on our website. So
Yeah.
thank you. Yes, we enjoy this live feedback. So
Yeah.
thank you, y'all.
And this next one is, this is how Bell Hooks defines love. To truly love, we must learn to mix various ingredients:
Mm.
care, affection, recognition, respect, commitment, trust, honest, and open communication. I was like, that's a recipe for love?
Yes.
Let me get that recipe.
Right? So when someone comes at you, I love you have to read the back. You're like, hold up, the fine print. You know, you look at the ingredients.
Remember
Like,
how they tell you to read the ingredients? Don't just be going based off of what it's in the front. Yeah, so that's how Bell Hooks defines love. It's a mixture of care, affection, recognition, respect, commitment, trust,
Mhm.
trust and honest and open communication. And what was a big revealer to me was like that you might have some of these and think it's love, but she's like, no, it's the combination. And
All
that
of
was like
them.
a big thing for me, because I'm like, oh, I've had
Mhm.
care. Yeah, I've had people respect what I do. I've had people, that I trust, but it's the combination, y'all. That's what really got me.
Yes, all of it together, right? So it's like these things alone are great, but they're not love. That's what Bell Hooks is talking about. Like all of those things on its own are great. We wouldn't say don't have care, don't have recognition, don't have communication, but it's together that is
Yes.
the true love.
And then she goes into Catholics versus love. Let me know if I'm saying that right, Tony. Catholics?
Cathect? I think it's
Catholics?
cathect because then
Catholics?
it's, I think the thing is cathexis.
Yeah,
Who
Catholics.
knows? If
Yeah.
you know the
If you know
pronunciation,
the
comment
pronunciation, go ahead and put in
below
the chat. But
how to
I
pronounce.
thought her, after she defined love, saying this is what it's not.
Mhm.
And Catholics versus love. So the definition of catheks is to invest feeling or emotion in someone. So when you have invested feeling and emotion, you have therefore katitied on someone, you know?
Gatiti.
And so that can happen with family, like, like she said, like, that can happen feeling like love comes, like you love your family, you love people that are in the bloodline, but that can be catheks because you've invested
Mhm.
feeling or emotion into this group. And I felt like that was an important ground layer. And then I'm just steaming through to the next
Yeah.
one. And she also said what it's not: love and abuse cannot coexist.
Well,
That
yeah,
was a
let's just
big
pause
part of the
there. Like,
chapter.
pause. Just love
Full
and
stop.
abuse cannot coexist, right? So, when we talk about this trauma bonding, when we talk about, oh, but actually, no. If there's any type of abuse, emotional, mental, physical, any of them, despite other abuses, whatever it is, it cannot coexist
Yeah.
with love. So you can't be like, oh, well, they abuse me in these ways and they hurt me in these ways, but like they love me so much. It's like, no, girl, they don't love you.
No, and that's what the catheks is, because you have invested time in that relationship. You've invested emotion. You'll want to stay. So for me, like
Mm.
these hard, like, this is what it's not, this is what it is. This is heavy stuff, y'all. So if you feel like getting through this first chapter of the book, took time, or you stopped reading through the first chapter, like, give yourself grace, because this is a lot of like deprogramming that has to happen if we're able to accept this new definition, and then also to unlearn what it's not.
Yeah. And I feel like for me growing up, I was more so raised that if love exists, then abuse is fine. It's written off. It's
Mhm.
okay, it's manageable, it's tolerated, it's a part of the process. Like that's how
Mhm.
I grew up. Love and abuse was
Mhm.
supposed to coexist. Like, oh, I love you so much that sometimes I then just hurt you.
You
And
know I love
that's what
you.
yes, that's why I grew up. And it was just like that's why like reading this book, I was like unlearning so much that like wow, like that doesn't have to be my experience. Like that's actually not the experience of love. And I think that's why growing up as I was a younger adult, I was so like, I guess, averse to love because I was like, oh my God, if I love someone, that means that they have the power to abuse me. And so I love that Bell Hook talked about like,
Mhm.
no, 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 no. No matter how much someone loves you, if abuse happens, and that's that's not love anymore.
Yeah.
That's just care. Maybe it's care for you. Maybe they're just giving you financial stuff. Maybe it's, they're just showing up to your
Yeah.
things, but they're not truly loving your
Mhm.
spiritual growth, right? So
And
that's what really made me finally be like,
Mhm.
yo, I wasn't actually taught
Yeah.
love.
And
Because if
that's
that's what I was taught, then it wasn't love.
Yeah, and that's what takes us to this next quote is care is a dimension of love, but simply giving care does not mean we are loving. Okay? Child care. They don't call it child love, child care.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, that was very I'm I'm with you, Tony. Like it was, and there's another quote: too many of us need to cling to a notion of love that either makes abuse acceptable or at least makes it seem that whatever happened was not that bad. Like,
Mm-hmm.
look, it turned out fine. Like that term.
I'm triggered, right? I'm already triggered. I'm just
Y'all,
like, oh
if
God.
y'all weren't triggered by the
Triggered.
first chapter, I mean, I really I envy your childhood. I envy all that because this was a really
Yeah.
hard pill to swallow for me. It was a hard
Yeah.
truth.
Yeah, we have some comments here. So we have Nia sharing that last quote about like love and abuse not existing together is really loaded to me when we talk about trauma and abuse in a house outside of romantic partnership that was seemingly filled with love as well, right? And I mean, in Bell Hook's words, maybe there was care, maybe there was respect, maybe there was other
Affection.
ways of affection and support, right? Maybe that kind of situation is supportive, but maybe love in the true aspect as Hooks defines is not there, right? And I think she does have this very high definition of love because it's like if we're going to strive for this thing, she's like, let's actually do it. So I think that's
Mhm.
also what she's talking about. But yeah, I'm loving this conversation because then Kyle shares, I think the use of abuse is
Mhm.
important too, because abuse is a different thing from harm. Mhm.
Mm.
I
Mhm.
think harm can be unintentional, but abuse never is.
Mm.
Okay, Kyle, you have a whole word right there,
Yes.
right? So harm can be unintentional, but abuse not. And yeah, I think that is kind of the side that Bell Hooks is leaning towards is that abuse is very not okay. I was looking for a different word, but abuse is just very heavy,
It's
very,
unexcusable.
yeah, unexcusable and also just traumatic in the fact of if you're growing up or if you're in a situation where this abuse is also constant, because I don't think abuse is commonly a one-time occurrence. It can be, but I think many times abuse is more so ongoing or a chronic,
Mhm.
constant thing. So I think if you're in a space where someone is saying they love you but constantly abusing you, it's just I really don't feel like love can be there. I think
Mhm.
care and all these other things, affirmation, sure,
Mhm.
support like financially and all these other things physically, but yeah, love, I think that's what the book is all about love. So we're talking about
All
love.
about love, not the things that be like around it. And there's another quote. So if you're like feeling how, I was feeling with reading this, like, oh my gosh, like, how do I grieve like,
Mhm.
how do I grieve this now that I know this new definition of love? And so this
Mhm.
quote is, if one's goal is self-recovery, to be well in one's soul, honesty, and realistically confronting lovelessness is a part of the healing process. That's why we're here, y'all.
Mm.
We are honestly and realistically confronting lovelessness as part, like the lack. Where's the lack? And then this next
Mhm.
quote is, embracing a new definition of love that was clear was the first step in the process. So now that's what we're doing right
Mhm.
now. We are being clear. Clarity, give love words. We are creating a new definition for our collective healing, our Soul Tree fam, a new definition for us to move forward in this process. And
Yeah,
another,
speaking of definitions, so definitions are vital starting points for the imagination. We talked about imagine last week with rest is resistance. So what we cannot imagine cannot come into being, right? So I think a lot of times some people are like, oh, I don't like definitions because it's too sterile, it's too rigid. But I do appreciate bell hooks being like, no, definition is the starting point, right? It's vital for us to imagine because,
Yes.
right, once we imagine, so if we are in an abusive situation, if we are in a space of lovelessness, we can imagine, reimagine,
Mhm.
create these new spaces for love to exist, right? Like maybe it's not in our tangible, foreseeable, realistic future right now and what we see in our day-to-day lives, realities, but we can imagine it to be true, right? And that's a part of that manifesting, right? When you can
Mhm.
manifest, when you create it in your head and imagine it, then you can manifest it into
Yes.
fruition.
Mhm. And then with this final quote for chapter 1 is, "We need a map to guide us on our
Mhm.
journey to love." And this book right here, y'all,
Yes.
this is a map. Bell Hooks created this beautiful map for us,
Mhm.
a guide for us to anchor ourselves in love and
Mhm.
practice the art of loving together as a community. So that's chapter 1,
Yeah.
y'all.
Yeah, so that was a lot. So we'll stop with chapter 1 today and we'll get to the other stuff as we go because we love the discussions. That's why we're spending longer on each thing. But for me, some notes that I have after my chapter 1, I wrote for the map quote, because in September we read Atlas of the Heart by Brene
Mhm.
Brown. And so that was about kind of mapping our different emotions. And so for me, I really resonated with like, a map as a guide to love to chart our journey to heal, right? Like, so we're not doing this blindly, right? There is a map, there is a guide, and so we can lean into that. And then also defining love as the first step of the journey.
Mm.
So once we define love, we can reimagine, reclaim, and cultivate love in all parts of our lives. So I think it's just so important as we, sit in and take in and embrace all of the juicy bits that we all shared in today's discussion that we give ourselves grace as the chapter's name, and we use this to be clear and have
Mhm.
clarity around what love means to us. So, right, we got to the end
Yes.
of part 1 of our All About Love book club. This is juicy, y'all. There's so much more we could have went into, but we are so grateful for you all for sticking through. If you're just joining, you can watch the replay, but I
Mhm.
did want to check in with you all on how you're feeling after reading the intro in chapter 1. So you can comment below how you're feeling, if there's anything coming up for you, if you have any other points that you wanted to share as we start to bring it to a close.
I'm really excited to read it in community with the Soul Tree fam. I know reading it on my own was a very therapeutic experience. I really enjoyed that journey I took with the book. I mean, I didn't feel alone. I felt Bell Hooks was, speaking to me the whole time. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to the discourse we're going to have in this book club. And I'm looking forward to us all like creating our own love ethic here
Mhm.
with our Soul Tree community.
Yeah, I feel good. I feel energized. Like honestly, every Wednesday after our book clubs, I do feel I have a gust of energy, which is nice, especially because I came in with not as much energy because this is my bleeding week on my period. But yeah, I just feel energized to talk about love. I feel like I'm in a different space in my personal life in regards to my relationship to love and what love and connection means to me from when I first read the book. So yeah, I'm excited to explore and remember and return with you all. So yeah, again, our theme for February is the art of loving. So we hope you continue to join us on Wednesdays, same time, same place, as we dive deeper into the book. Right, each chapter is so juicy, so we will prepare to cover a couple chapters. But if we only get to 1 or 2, that's fine. And we'll just keep going. But yeah, we love all of your comments and your enthusiasm.
Yes. Like they say, love is patient, love is kind.
Mhm.
have a comment from Jasmine. I'm looking forward to the discussion as well. I've wanted to read this book in community for a long time. So really happy that Sultry is creating this space.
Yes.
We're happy to have you, Jasmine.
Thank you.
Mia shares feeling more equipped to redefine past experiences and set clear definitions of what love can feel like and what I want that to look like at this point in my journey. Love that. Yes. And then Kyle Moore. When I finished the chapter, I was really curious to see more about how she applied that really high idea of love. Yes. It's like, tell me more. Tell me more.
Right?
Dive in, y'all.
Yeah, so definitely check out our website, sultrysisters.com/book club to keep up with what we're doing. You can visit our YouTube channel and subscribe at Sultry Sisters to watch all the replays. We are so grateful to be in community with you all. Yeah, so happy month of love in February. Follow us on social media to see what we're up to. And if you're in San Diego, come to our Galentine's Day event in North County, San Diego.
Yes, it's going to be really, really fun. We're going to dance, learn more on our website on our events page. We'll see you then.
Yes, bye y'all.
Bye.